Well, certainly, economic growth is necessary to create jobs and to provide the resources to fulfill the social and kind of environmental dimensions that we're looking for in this sustainable development framework. The problem is that if you pursue growth at all costs without taking into consideration the social and environmental dimensions, you actually see that it undermines those. So what's unique about the post-Rio process is that it put these pillars, these three pillars, environmental, social, and economic, kind of on equal footing. From the ITUC and the worker movement, we have institution where we operate in a tripartite manner with governments and private sector, where this is called the International Labour Organization. And there we, in a tripartite manner, come to agreement on conventions that essentially aim for improving working conditions for people, but also creating the environment whereby businesses can actually operate and, flourish, so to speak. You don't have to look very far. I mean, if you see what happens in global value chains, where it's basic economics, where a company is trying to increase its profit margins, and so what it does is it finds places where perhaps there's not the legal framework in countries to protect workers' rights or pay them adequate wages, so they operate in those countries, increasing their profit margins, but not respecting sort of the social pact, or not upholding social justice, and sort of undermining these universal human rights. And this happens in many places in the world, South Asia for sure. We see, the disaster in Bangladesh is a pretty perfect example of companies not taking the onus to actually promote and respect basic workers' rights in line with ILO standards. Well, so monitoring and reporting, this is sort of a personal reflection, I suppose, but when you think about monitoring and reporting, you're thinking about trying to assess progress based on some objectives. This can be voluntary, this can be purely a question of statistics and trying to understand. I mean, in essence, it's supposed to influence behavior change, because you have an idea, you basically set out whether or not you're succeeding or failing and where. So it's obviously very necessary, but it can only complement the accountability part, because if there's if there are areas where things are not progressing adequately, you have to have some sort of mechanism to create the accountability that the change really will happen, behavior change will happen, to actually fulfill the obligations that you've agreed to in whatever kind of framework you're trying to develop. And so for those, we use from the union movement, we like to cite quite often the ILO supervisory mechanism, which is based on standards. It's based on conventions, which have some binding aspect that both governments, workers, and employers organizations have signed up to. They're intended to be ratified into national law. And then there's a mechanism by which you can say if there's violations of these conventions, or if they're not meeting these conventions, there's a mechanism up to the global level where you can remedy this sort of thing. So this is the sort of accountability mechanism we're looking for in a post-2015 framework, is something that's a bit more binding and not based on voluntary commitments only.